Carrie, aren't you someplace like in Portugal or someplace?
I think he walked away from the, oh, he's still on mute.
I think he's like somewhere it's 2 o'clock in the morning or some god awful hour.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where do you think he is?
Somewhere overseas.
Oh, really? Oh my
That's
goodness.
what I hear. But it appears that he's at least online. I don't know if we'll see his face. He's probably in his pajamas.
Well, everybody else is coming on slowly but surely there. Now, Steve is going to be the host now.
Steve went mute. No, he's not mute.
Now he's not there.
I'm just getting in there now.
Oh.
Carrie's gone. Isn't Carrie someplace in Europe, Steve?
He is. He's in Portugal, actually.
Portugal, that's what I thought.
Oh, okay.
Today we had he was presenting as part of a competition for, I don't know, I think it's called the World Architectural Awards or something.
Oh, wow.
For the, what's it called?
Discovery
Building. Yeah.
Got it.
And he told me that although the presentation went very well and it was, the project was well received, we didn't win the world.
Oh, well, darn.
We're not the best in the world, it turns out.
Oh, I thought we were.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well,
but anyway, so he's in Portugal for the week, and I think, well, gosh, it's the middle of the night there now, but
yeah,
right.
I think this evening there they had their presentation, and then I think there was, if they were selected, they went on to whatever the next round was, but turns out we didn't get there.
It's okay.
Still, to be nominated for it is pretty good. There were very few. I think we were the only American, maybe there was 2 American educational projects nominated, very few.
Well, a week well deserved in Portugal, compliment to the district.
Yeah, well, I think what the district paid for was his flight, and maybe the hotel for yesterday and today or something, but the rest of it was on him.
He's going to take advantage of that. He got a flight
there anyway, so
yeah.
So it appears we have a quorum. Is that correct, Steve?
1, 2, 3.
Well,
4.
Melody's staff,
You do.
Right.
and we have the auditor. So
yes, we've got Dr. Nofre and Thea, as well as Jeffrey, Catherine, and Michael.
So we're good to go.
Good.
Okay.
And get it started.
All right. I am calling the meeting to order of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Our first rule of business is to approve the minutes of September 13th, 2022. I don't know if you folks have had a chance to review those. Maybe not.
I did.
Okay. Are there any comments, changes, additions that need to be made that anybody has noted?
My only comment was that I think I'm still listed there as Ms. Rosenfeld, and I'm still presenting as male.
Something, Jeffrey,
Sorry,
that we should know?
We will fix that. Sorry about that.
Jeffrey's correcting a pronoun. Anybody else? Okay, I need a motion then to approve the minutes.
I so moved to approve the minutes.
Second?
Second with the correction.
Great. All in favor of approving the minutes as is, with the one correction from Jeffrey, please indicate by raising your hand. Any objections? Anyone objecting? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes have been approved. We have some action items. We have the acceptance of the bond audit reports, the measure BBES and SMS.
So Jeffrey, with this, we would, I'm sorry, Michael, with this, I would turn it over to Shiloh and she'll walk through the audit reports. And then after that, you'll need a motion to approve acceptance of the reports. And I think you can do all of them together.
Okay.
So Shiloh, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here tonight. So we have 3 reports that we're looking at. I don't know if you have any particular order that you would like to go over them in. If you would like to go over each one and pause for questions, I can do that as well. So I'll just go ahead and.
Why is it on?
We have somebody, okay. There's no questions right now, right? Okay, so I'll just go ahead and get started. The first one on my screen is Measure ES, so I will start there. Now, I'm going to briefly go over each of the reports, but just overall, just so you have maybe just the overall, before I start, each of the reports, you know, we give you an opinion on the financial statements, and we also provide you a report on performance with respect to compliance with the ballot language and making sure that the expenditures are compliant. So this is a twofold report. It has the financial audit as well as the performance audit for each of the measures. And just to summarize the results of all of them, each one is an unmodified opinion on your financial statements for those measures, meaning that as presented, we believe these financial statements for each measure to be materially stated. I'll also point out that as we go through each one briefly, that we did not have any compliance findings to note with any of the performance audits, so that they are considered clean reports without any issues. So with that, should I share screen to, if there's any specific pages to?
I think so, yeah, that's
Can
probably
I
the
share
best.
screen? Okay,
So I made you co-host, Shiloh, so I think you
Great.
should be.
great, thank you. Now let's just, hopefully I can share the right screen here. Let's see, and not yet. I always seem, okay, here we go. Let's do this. Did that work?
I can see it.
Yes.
You see the report?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the first one on my screen is Measure ES. I spoke to you about the independent auditor's report itself. As I mentioned, it's an unmodified opinion. And just to recap for you, the financial statements and where we ended at June 30, 2022. For Measure ES, you're looking at the balance sheet as of that date. You ended the year with just under 29 million, 28.6 million left in a fund balance in Measure ES. If you are looking here now at the income statement, as you can see, overall, you had about 22.4 million in expenditures for the year for Measure ES. You did have some activity coming in from other sources. You had some funds transferred in from your Measure M, as well as some funds that came in from your Fund 35 County School Facility programs. So those are all reflected there as well. And as I mentioned, 28.6 million is where you ended on Measure ES. I did also mention to you the performance audit, but before I go to that, we do have included with each of your reports, I didn't mention this in my preview, you have included in each of your reports our independent auditor's report on your internal controls over financial reporting. This is our required reporting. If we identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the internal controls over your financial reporting, we are required to report those to you. And so these reports for each of the measures, so I'll say it all up front, we didn't have any internal control, significant deficiencies or material weaknesses to report out. So that is good as well. And as I mentioned, on the performance reports, the second part of the audit here, this is our report on performance, and you'll read through the second to the last paragraph. Our results, the results of our test indicate that the district expended those funds as approved by the voters. So it's a clean report. Within this portion of the report, we do also provide a little bit of context regarding the audit, you know, what our objectives were, our scope, how we went about those audit procedures specifically. This page here, it's page 23 on your PDF of the report in procedure 4. We do really lay out for you in detail how many expenditures we looked at in terms of the dollar amount. So in this particular measure, we looked at over 91% of those expenditures that are included in Measure ES. So pretty large amount of the expenditures that we are auditing from that compliance standpoint. With capital project funds and construction projects in general, the nature of those expenditures are large. So it's generally tends to be easy for us to audit such a high coverage with those dollars. I think it provides a pretty good comfort level on that compliance piece of the audit. So that's your Measure ES. If there's any questions on that one, otherwise, if not, I can jump to the next one.
Shiloh, if I want to ask, because I'm pretty sure I saw this in all three, but did we have on ES, did we have an issue last fiscal year, so 2021, that was resolved, or was that just the others? No.
I believe it was the others. So what that was is what you would have seen, and let me jump to BB, because if it's in
Might
BB,
as well, sorry.
No, that's okay. It would have been, maybe it was ES. Hold on one second.
I think it might have been SMS, and then we had a similar on M, which this-
Oh, probably. Here's
this committee
SMS.
wants to-
It
Yes.
was SMS, yes.
And that's related to when we had audit adjustments in the audit. So I know it's probably, you're looking at it really small. I'm just trying to scroll for purposes of going quickly. There's a page here. It is.
I didn't mean for us to
No,
jump
that's
ahead.
okay.
I thought
No,
it was
that's
in
okay.
ES.
Yeah,
Okay.
no worries. But I am on SMS now. And so just to draw attention to that page, in each of your reports, you do have a page that summarizes the prior year findings and if there were findings and the resolution of those findings. So yes, for SMS, as you can see, and it does, not to confuse it with a current year finding, it does say summary of prior. It's also labeled by the fiscal year. So it says 2021 on this one. And then essentially in the prior year, we had audit adjustments that we included as part of our findings. And as you'll see here, we had no audit adjustments this year. So it will tell you at the bottom of that page that it was not repeated. So for SMS, that is there. I don't believe it was on BB or ES, but I will take you back now since I'm on SMS. I already went through your opinions. Again, like I said, they are unmodified opinions. But just to summarize here for you, so you can see your balance sheet as of June 30. This one, obviously, one of your newer ones, you did have a new issuance. So you've got about 146 million in this one as of June 30, 22. And you can see here on your income statement, it reflects the 200 million in new proceeds that were issued in 21-22. And you've spent, as of June 30, just under 55 million of that. So like I said, a newer issuance, which is why you still have quite a bit of money sitting in there for spending.
What is the other local revenue at the top, 5 million? What is that?
That is it. Is that part of the jams?
It was,
Maybe.
yes.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
So
it's
that
from
would
the
have been from
college?
SMC. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, got it.
It's that agreement where you get that additional funding.
Got it.
Good question. And then this one as well, I'm going to just scroll like I did for the others right to the back, because I think that's the part you guys like to see. How did we do on the performance audit testing? This one, we're still at 67% total expenditures tested, which is still a large percentage in the audit world. It's not 90, but 67 still has a pretty good coverage in terms of that compliance audit. 36 out of 54 million expenditures were reviewed, and no issues noted. Any questions on SMS?
Shiloh, and you can wait till after the other one too is fine. Can you just give a snippet of what the fair market value number represents? Because it's on all three, and I think not in this meeting, but earlier today somebody asked about it, and you can even wait till after you do the other one, but I think that'll be good to shed some light on what that is, because I think it's only year 2 of it, right?
Yeah, no problem. And we broke it out a little differently to try to make it a little more transparent on the face of the financials. So I can do that.
Sure.
So BB, going to measure BB. Now this is the one that is really pretty much phasing out. We are just about done with Measure BB, as you can see here on your balance sheet. And this is probably the good one to talk about the fair market value, because that's really the reason why you're looking at a ending fund balance of a negative number, $1,500. This one's pretty much closed out. Just before I go over the fair market values, you can see spent just over $5 million here in Measure BB. So wound this one down to the end. So just kind of going back, what I will mention now, as Gerardo had mentioned. So fair market value, you guys have money in all of your measures and your bond funds that sits in the county treasury pool. For all operational purposes, you call that cash. In the accounting world, we call that an investment-like asset, and it is subject to market value adjustments, similar to any personal investment portfolio you might hold. Those market values fluctuate, they go up and down. And at the end of the year, we do reflect those market value adjustments on your financial statements for the change in the county treasury balances. And so for June 30, it was sitting at a fair market value unrealized loss. And that is why, so you can see here, like I said, I broke it out to make it clear for you. The unrealized loss on this particular measure of $1,500 is the reason why this balance shows a negative. In the new year, Gerardo will reverse that entry and bring it back to zero, and that fund is essentially, I believe, closed out. So it doesn't really have an effect operationally for you. It's just a presentation of that point in time, what the market pool looked like.
So does that fair market value fluctuate?
It does. The interesting part is June 30 of this past fiscal year was probably a really weird time for the investment market.
Yeah.
We generally look at county pools as pretty stable.
Right.
For the most part, you're pretty much dollar for dollar, but every once in a while, those pools will show a fluctuation that's more than what we would consider insignificant. This happened to be one of those years where Los Angeles's county investment pool was showing about a 5% unrealized loss at June 30. It sounds like a lot. It recovers, but at that point in time, it was probably down more than I had ever seen it in quite some years.
And if that affects us, it affects everything else in the county pool, correct?
It absolutely does.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there's only one time in my over 20-year career where I've ever seen any losses realized, and that was the bankruptcy in Orange County back in, the early 2000s, which is the whole reason why we had to start reporting these pools at fair market value, was when Orange County had their bankruptcy, and they had to pass that loss on to their pool members because they never recovered from it. But other than that, I've never seen it happen.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So aside from that, just going back again, as I showed for the other two, for testing purposes, here we were sitting at about a 93% coverage, almost 5 million of 5.3 million that we looked at with respect to Measure BB for compliance auditing purposes. So with that, I'll pause, and if there are any questions, happy to take anything else from anybody.
Move on.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Shiloh.
You're welcome.
I will give a special shout out to both, obviously Shiloh, as well as Ashraf and David, who are on the call. They spent a lot of time and effort checking the numbers. I think Ashraf checks the numbers 10 times and says, I still don't see it. No, I'm kidding. But she's doing her due diligence. And there's a person on Shiloh's team. She's the manager that helps us, Kelly, who also invests a lot of time and energy into preparing the audit and the scope of work for us. So thank you to all of you, and especially Shiloh and Kelly. So thanks.
And curious, Steve, when does this go to the school board for approval?
I want to say, is it the first meeting in January?
It'll be the 15th of December.
Oh,
Of December.
Yeah,
We
which
We
is
usually, you're right, Steve. We usually do it kind of late, but we're on track now. So we're gonna do it when we're supposed to do it in December.
awesome.
yeah.
And is
It'll
it
be
on
our
the
new
consent,
board at that, so.
is it on a consent calendar, Steve, or do they discuss it?
I don't know. That's a Gerardo and Melody question.
They
They're
discuss it.
Yeah, they're action items.
Mhm.
It is, okay, thank you.
And I think this is, I think, probably our first, speaking of timing, it's our first year where we got it exactly the way we want it, to where the board has an interest of all of the oversight committees, the bond and financial oversight committee, seeing draft reports presented before it comes to the board, so that if there's any comments, edits, tweaks, input, feedback from any of the committees, that there's the opportunity to do that. So thank you, Shiloh, for humoring us as well on that. We're probably one of the fewer districts that actually does it in this way, and we know it's a little odd, but we have a very interested community, as you know, so it's important that we give that opportunity.
I would also like to give a shout out to Gerardo because he didn't pull his own chain there, but he does run a pretty tight ship. I appreciate him always being there, looking out for the bottom line, and working so closely with Shiloh, our auditor, and others as well. Thank you.
Okay, Steve.
So I think, Michael, the next thing would be for if a member wanted to move to accept the 3 audit reports.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion, Bruce Sultan.
Thank you, Bruce. And a second? Kathy? Okay. All in favor of accepting the audit reports, please indicate by raising your hand or saying aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you, Bernice.
Looks
Anyone
like you got it.
opposed? Any abstentions? It passes. Thank you all.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Gerardo, Shiloh, thank you. And David and Ashraf, thank you guys for being here. Okay,
Okay,
Michael,
then
so
moving right along our agenda, are there any public comments?
I have not received any. And although I don't think Kathy has audio right now, I'm confident would have told me if she had.
Okay, then we'll move on to program updates, and I'll turn it over to Steve.
All right, great. So I'll first go through the BB and ES financial reports. There's not a ton to go through on these. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then I may need to adjust the size here. Start with BB. Are you seeing that?
Not yet. Now we are.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Is it big enough? I know we've had some.
Not really. There you go.
All right.
That's better.
Okay. Okay. So this is the BB report. I should start at the top. You're going to see that there are very, very few expenditures during this time period. I think, and I'll work with Ashraf, but I think we'll be looking to close this out within this fiscal year. The first page, we have no expenditures during the reporting period. Second page, we have no expenditures. Third page, we have a couple of small expenditures. So what we see here is we've got at Malibu High School. This is the what we call the AB building. So that's the library, admin, classrooms. It's going to end up being the middle school building, but anyway, so this is the project, the BB project that's been in use for a little while. We had a few expenditures, 15,500, soft costs, 5,400, and hard costs, and then we still have some outstanding encumbrances of 50,000, which, you know, as we're going through and closing out this project. In fact, our soft costs were almost certainly our CM and architect working on closeout with through DSA. As we go through and close out this project, there of course are some small expenditures that we have, but again, I think that this fiscal year we should be able to close that out. And then as we go to our fourth page, we see that there are no expenditures, and same with the fifth page. So our total spend during this reporting period was a combined $21,000 for BB. So not a ton to report on that one. Now, let me switch to ES. Make it bigger so you can see it. Is ES up?
Yes.
Hopefully that's big enough to see. Okay, so on ES, naturally we did have a few more expenditures. Our 21st century, I'm sorry, our ES technology, and this is something that's been, you may recall, this is a group of projects and budgets that haven't been managed by the facilities department. This has been done by the IT department throughout the last several years. However, as you can see, there's a chunk of money that's left, several $1 million that is budgeted but not yet spent and not yet encumbered. So in October, the board authorized reallocation of that funding, still staying within technology, but to different priorities. So I think, for example, the infrastructure that was originally anticipated, we built out what we needed to, and now there's some more work that needs to be done. And same with 21st century classrooms, they'll be adding Wi-Fi access points and so forth. So that work is now moving forward. It will actually now, going forward, be managed from the facilities department, but in conjunction with IT. So we've got one of our project managers named Rami, who's working with Bertha from the IT department and moving that work forward.
Are they going to spend all those funds on that?
They will, and so it's a slightly different allocation than what you see here. So for example, computer lab upgrades, we had $500,000 left in that, but we don't build computer labs anymore because everybody now has a one-to-one device. So instead of building, a computer lab that will never be used, we're going to be reallocating that and using it for, I guess, to support those one-to-one device uses. But yes, all of that funding is staying within the technology realm and will be spent on that.
All right, thank you.
You bet. And then we had some, of course, expenditures on Discovery Building. Now the building has been in use, but as I mentioned, we're closing out a project. There's always a few things that still occur. So we still had, we spent about $375,000 in this reporting period, with another 1.6 million encumbered, but not yet spent. The next expenditures we had were in our, and again, a lot of these are.
Steve,
Yes.
just what you have a note there about increase the budget by 9 million from Samohi contingent. Can you just explain that?
Sure. So I mean, that was something that we did many months ago when we increased the contract cost. So within each category, in Measure ES, there were a few categories. So there was, I'm going to scroll back up. So there was the technology budget, and there was the Malibu allocation budget, which was the 77 million. Then there were Samohi budget and Santa Monica other, which is really everything except Samohi. So within the Samohi budget, we had built in a contingency, and you see it's now down to zero. We had built in a contingency because, of course, projects oftentimes do go over budget, and we need to have some funding available if that happens. In this case, there were a number of changes throughout the project, and we needed to reduce the or increase the budget using that contingency funding. We also ended up using some of the centralized expense funding, which the centralized expenses, we track our centralized expenses, and forgive me if this is repetitive because I'm sure you've heard it before. We track our centralized expenses would be things like my time, our staff time, staff that is working, district staff working exclusively on bond projects, our attorneys, and a number of other expenses like that. I mean, I would say office supplies, and that is part of it, but it's of course a minor part of it. But we track those in one spot, and then it gets distributed to the projects ultimately, because it is, if we weren't doing these projects, we wouldn't have those centralized expenses. So it's natural to transfer that. The big issue here, as you mentioned, Catherine, was transferring, excuse me, the contingency into this project. And that is what it's for. I mean, we'd always like to not have to dip into contingency, but in this case we had to, in order to finalize the project. We ended up at 147 million and change, but it was necessary to use the contingency for that. And you'll see where I'm not sure we have any others that we'll see today, but in the future, you'll see again that there are times when we have to transfer that contingency into a project. Okay, so then our next chunk of expenses here was in Santa Monica other, and you'll see this is much smaller than Discover. Well, than you'll see in Measure SMS, I should say, because we're kind of finished with these projects. Now we did have some expenditures on the Jams Auditorium. Again, it's a building that's in use. You've obviously seen it since our last meeting was there. But as we close out the project, we'll have some expenses that will continue. We think that we believe we're pretty safe with the amount that's encumbered and shouldn't need to go any further than that. Now the next, the next encumbrances that we have and expenditures, you'll see that we've got this 64,000. Now that's money that has not been distributed, right? So that's our centralized costs, like I was talking about earlier. It's tracked here at the end of the, I think at the end of the fiscal year, we distribute that amongst the projects. And then that's about it for Measure ES. SMS is where the bulk of the work was. So I'm going to switch my share one more time.
Just one thing, what are
Please.
these red numbers? I don't like seeing red numbers on a spreadsheet.
No, I hear you. Nobody likes seeing red numbers. Okay, are we still up? I mean, is it
Yes,
still visible?
yes,
Okay.
you're still up.
So, so the red numbers are where we don't have sufficient budget. So I think an example of that is up here. Well, that's not a great one. Actually, it's fine. So in Santa Monica other HVAC, this is again, we have some costs that they're the same type of costs as centralized costs, but they're specific to HVAC. So we had a construction manager managing all of our HVAC projects. Their cost was tracked together and then distributed to those. So here we see a negative number that ultimately will be distributed through the HVAC projects. But I have a feeling the bigger numbers down here are a bigger concern to you. So the 8.8 million, taking all of these projects together, and a big portion of the reason we ended up with a significant negative number there is because of the 16 million that we've in fact, we used to be 22 million we had here as BB shortfalls. So this is money that was spent on BB projects that were over budget, because that budget was very tight. And when we had projects that went over budget, money had to come from somewhere. It came from the next fund. So I think that is what ultimately led us to the net negative. And you'll see here we've got, we had originally $93 million budgeted, 102 million was spent, which left us this negative 9 million. Excuse me. Now there are some things that cover that. So for example, we have not yet accounted for the interest received. That hasn't been moved into the total funding. That interest is about $7 million, which obviously that's a big chunk out of 9 million. And then we do still have some budgeted money that has not yet been spent. So from the Samo High budget, we have about 1.3 million that's unspent. And then we've already talked about this ES technology. But as we get through this, we may get to the point where, we're saying, all right, well, we're $700,000 short on this. And again, it hasn't all been expended because there's 3.7 million of it that's just encumbered and not yet spent. As we close out these projects, that number will come down, that net, that delta, I guess. Because, in some of our projects, we have money encumbered that won't actually be spent. Anyway, so that's something though, as we get further and further along, although I expect to close out BB completely in this fiscal year, I don't expect to close out ES completely, but as we get closer to that, that number is going to have to come down, or we're going to have to be funding it from SMS. And in some cases, you're going to see, well, you saw in the audit, you won't see it here, but you saw in the audit report that there was some money from Measure M that was put into ES. It was, it was transferred to ES because the Malibu project went over budget. And I don't think we're showing that here. We're not showing. Oh, wait.
Yeah, funded from ES
So this is
shortfalls.
the BB project, right? So this is the BB project that funded from Measure ES. There is some funding from Measure M that came in as well. And you can see we moved a number of projects to Measure M instead of keeping them in here. That Malibu project, you know, it was very delayed, and I think you'll all remember the reasons for that. Where you know, this wasn't the PCB lawsuit actually. This was the lighting lawsuit that we had from. I mean, it had to be 10 years ago now. That delayed the project by I think something like 6 years, and of course, costs go up significantly over that amount of time, but the amount of money you have to build does not. So, you know, the district, the community said, this is still the project we want. We need to move forward with it. And so we did. But when we did, excuse me, we ended up with a project that was significantly more expensive than the money we had. And that's on top of the amount of money we needed to spend during that time period. So, you know, you look at this and you say, geez, $43 million, that seems crazy. But that's also, you know, that was one of the things that when we went forward with when the district went forward with Measure ES, it was known that, hey, some of this is going to be paying for that BB project that otherwise can't be built. So anyway, does that answer your question though, Catherine?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. I also remember things like there was stuff with the COVID and getting cement delivered, and I don't know.
You're exactly right. That did happen with that Malibu project, and
Yeah.
I mean, it was there was a big thing about wind that was coming in. We had to. I mean, you have a great memory. Remember that because I'm barely remembering that it happened. So anyway, that was yes. There were a number of costs on that project.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
Of course. Okay. So now moving on to Measure SMS. Of course, we had a lot more expenditures because we are in construction on these projects.
Hang on. What about window, paint, floor, and HVAC?
Oh, we just didn't have. Oh, you're right. I'm jumping ahead. Thank you, Michael. Let me find my agenda under one of these open windows. Okay. So thank you very much. Okay. So window, paint, floor, HVAC projects. There isn't actually a lot to report for work that was done during this reporting or since our last meeting. But you may recall that I think our last meeting was in September and we were either just past or in the midst of a heat wave. And it was significantly impacting operations and the use of our classrooms. It turned out that a lot of these things got conflated, right? Because it was, oh, air conditioning's down everywhere. Of course it wasn't. It was down in specific locations, but they were spread around and it felt like everywhere. You know, the Discovery building, you'd hear, oh, the air conditioning's completely out. Well, there was half of a floor where the air conditioning was completely out. Rogers, we had puddles of water everywhere because the air conditioning was condensate all over the place. A lot of these ended up being, there's a weird combination of things that occurred. So we had COVID protocols, which said it's recommended that you do some combination of the following things. Keep windows and doors open so we can get airflow. Keep your HVAC running all the time, even if it's just ventilation, even if it's not cooling, keep it running all the time for increased airflow. You should increase the filtration. So we put in MERV 13 filters instead of MERV 9 and 11s, which we normally would have had. When you took that combination of things and you operated when, you know, it was 75 degrees outside, it was no big deal because it was okay to have the windows and doors open. Nobody was getting too hot and it wasn't overtaxing the air conditioning units because they really didn't have to cool very much. But when we faced a heat wave, it wasn't just a day or two. Remember, this thing lasted almost 2 weeks. The combination of those things, so we had our increased filters, they're great. They remove more particulates from the air, but they also clog up faster. So we used to be on a cycle of something like every 6 months, filters needed to be changed. We knew that MERV 13s were going to fill up faster. So the district worked 2 technicians out of class, and all they did was change, I think all they did was change air filters. And they were on a cycle of instead of every 6 months, they were replacing them every 3 months. But we found that at 6 weeks, so half of that, we took the original cycle and we cut it in half. Half of that cut in half cycle was not enough. So at 6 weeks, we were finding that these filters were just caked with dust and particulate matter. And that was really taxing on the air conditioning units. Of course, you think, you know, if you're sucking through a straw, it's kind of hard sometimes. But if you put a piece of, you know, tightly woven fabric over it, it's even harder to suck through. So it's really stressing these units. When you add that to the fact that now they're trying to cool even hotter air, and it was a pretty humid heat wave as well. We ended up with problems everywhere. So it was a little bit much for M&O to handle with their existing staffing. So Carrie asked me to work with Glenn, the M&O director, and I did. And we identified a list of outstanding work orders and new work orders that were just pouring in at that point. We brought in an HVAC contractor who had done a lot of work for us in our projects, and kind of said, "Hey, you guys are the M&O crew for the next 3 weeks." And they went around and they were changing filters and they were replacing, you know, broken units, and they were fixing ductwork and things like that. And they made a lot of progress. In fact, I think they worked through the entire outstanding work order list. So although our guys did a lot of that, it wasn't funded by FIP, by the bonds. It was funded by M&O. But we think now we're in a position, we, the district, are in a position where things are pretty squared away as far as air conditioning. Now, if we got another, I know we're in, well, practically December, got another heat wave tomorrow, and you know, we were still trying to keep the doors and windows open. Yes, we could face the same thing, but we've taken care of a lot of older issues, like units that were suboptimal or needed to be charged with Freon and so forth. And I think M&O now has hired, I know that they've hired one technician, and if I'm not mistaken, they've been approved to hire the second technician. I think they're in the process of that. Melody, is that right?
You're correct. Yes.
Okay. So I think M&O is going to be on a little bit better footing to handle those things going forward. And the fact that we've been able to knock out a lot of those has been helpful. So hopefully we won't face those same kind of issues as we go forward. But if they do, we'll figure it out and work on it again. And
just as a side note, our utility bills went up by $500,000. So yeah, no big deal.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Well, you went from having no air conditioners to running air conditioners 24/7. So
yeah. Wow. That's significant. Okay, so thank you, Michael. That was really the only thing I had to report on HVAC. So can we go to SMS?
Let's go.
Okay. So is it still on the screen?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Wonderful. Okay. So as you would expect, our biggest expenditures were Discovery. We are in construction on the Discovery project. We started that over the summer. We spent about $11 million in this reporting period on that project. If you drive by on Pico, you'll see the walls are starting to come up. You can see them over the fence now. When I drove by the other day, there was I think we had 2 concrete pours going at the same time, one from above and one from below, which is pretty exciting. They're making good progress. We seem to be on schedule, and you know, that one's moving forward nicely. That project was delayed coming out of DSA, so there's costs with that, kind of twofold coming out of DSA. And we always talk about when a project gets delayed that you may end up with costs that are associated with sort of escalation, because of course materials get more expensive and so forth. But our costs here were a little bit different. So we had an actual delay. We expected to be able to get out of DSA, I'll say it was April 9th, or I believe it was April, anyway, in April, and get right into construction. We didn't actually get out of DSA until I think mid-June. So construction really kind of started late June, beginning of July. That's a 2.5 month hit. And you know, during that time, DSA also had gotten back to us with a bunch of changes that they wanted. Now that's not unexpected. We had the same thing on Discovery, but here on the innovation building and gym, you know, as we got those changes, we were working with the contractor to work with their subs to price those changes. And move that work forward. I don't think you're going to be surprised to hear that when DSA requires us to make a change, they never end up picking a cheaper option. So the changes that they made have resulted in additional costs, and we're going to be bringing a change order to the board, I think December 15th, a contract amendment rather, to the board on December 15th to increase the cost to cover those things, as well as cover the delay and a few other small items. But regardless, the contractor was working throughout the summer. That's I think we had quite a 3-month delay coming out of DSA, but by resequencing some things and working with their steel supplier. So McCarthy's a big contractor, right? And they have a lot of jobs. They ended up with another job that was delayed for other reasons, and they were able to work with their steel supplier to say, hey, that project that you were planning on doing for us in, say, October, November, that one's delayed, and now we need you to do this one, our project. So we were able to recover a bunch of that time. So in that 3 months, I think ended up costing us only 7 weeks because of things like resequencing and kind of jumping the line for our steel. At this point, we're anticipating getting structural steel starting in December. I want to say it's close to winter break. So when kids come back from winter break, you should start seeing a structure build its way up. I mean, it won't go up quite as fast as the Discovery Building did. That was a different construction method, but when you drive by, you'll start seeing the skeleton of the building coming up. So now moving down a little further. Okay, I'm going to walk through these. We do, of course, have our regular HVAC projects going forward. Lincoln HVAC, these costs that we're looking at here, so this 400,000 and 108, those are related to the project that was already underway. In fact, all of the costs you're seeing here under HVAC are related to that. None of them are related to the repair work or the heat wave emergency work that I was talking about before. We did find some repairs that contractors had to do, but of course we don't pay for that when they've made an error or something that they need to repair. Contractor covers that. So again, these expenditures are about in line with what we'd expect. We're going to see as we get down here into I'm going to talk about these more when we get to the project updates, but when we get down here to our early elementary building at Rogers, our Franklin Makerspace, our McKinley early elementary, you see that we had some pretty significant soft costs, and that's our design costs, as well as DSA permitting fees and so forth. Those are all moving forward, and I don't want to get too much into the detail there because that's part of our next update. Here, and we've seen this before, where we have some expenditures that are negative in a particular reporting period. Typically that means we've moved it. So this went from Franklin master planning, and I'm sure that moved up into Franklin Makerspace and field project. Can you see that when I highlight it?
Not a highlight.
Okay.
Yeah, yes, we can.
I see the highlight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Great.
we can.
So that's when, I know it feels weird to see it a negative number as an expenditure, but that's just transferring funding from one project to another, and it went from Franklin to the Franklin project. It went from Roosevelt to the Roosevelt project. Okay. So the rest of these where we do have positive expenditures on soft costs. So McKinley, Grant, Will Rogers, a lot of that we're still working on the environmental CEQA issues and so forth. What else do we have on here? Where we had some hard costs were Smash Mirror, FF&E. Now you asked last time, and I do have some pictures that when we get to our update, I'll show you. But you had asked last time, when we're doing this FF&E, what is it? What are we really doing? Then I told you it's desks and things like that, but I've got some pictures for you this time.
Okay.
Okay, so again, I'm going to see where here. I'm going to kind of remember to point out red negative numbers that none of us want to see, but
Yeah.
this is another one where we centralize these. So we have some costs that are associated with safety and security, and those will be distributed through the projects that are below it as we get through the year. Okay, so overall, our expenditures were it's like about almost $16 million, no, almost $18 million during this reporting period. And of that 18 million, if you remember up at the top, about 11.5 of it was the innovation, the exploration and gymnasium building. So any questions on this before we go into project updates?
Looks good, thank you.
Okay, so stop sharing. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna get back to our agenda. And so the next thing we're going to talk about Samuel High projects. I did kind of give you this update already on the exploration and gold gym. We're well under construction there. I'd like, and it may be too early to do our next meeting there, but I'd like to have one of our meetings, maybe the June meeting, if we can, at the Samuel High site, so you guys can see the progress up close. Would that work for you?
I think
Yeah,
that's a
that'd
great
be
idea.
great.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. Well, we'll do that. And again, beyond what I said, I don't really have much more to add to the exploration and gold gym update. Now, the district-wide FF&E updates.
Steve, can I just ask a question? What's the completion date for those?
So we're still on track to open in August of 24.
Okay.
It got tougher when we were delayed coming out of DSA, but we believe we're still on track for that. You know, if things come up and we face unavoidable delays, I may need to come back and tell you that's not going to happen. But at this point, we're tracking that.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so now I will share something new. Are you able to see a screen with
Pictures, yep.
pictures? Wonderful. Okay, so this is, earlier when I did this, I had a little button that I could click through, but not there. Okay, so this is in a, just a standard typical classroom. And what you'll see is we've got the desks, for example, are on rollers. In the back here, we have some kind of, they look like a wide table, but that's actually two desks close to each other. And then we do have the wider tables where you can fit 3 kids on each side. You'll see that in some cases we have, there it is. So our chairs are on wheels, tables are on wheels. This is all, it's modular, so the teacher can set up the room as he or she would like. And they can, here they've got it created. So they've got small group settings. Now this is great for lecture, but it also works for breaking kids up into groups to work on projects or do their reading. Excuse me. Then they've got these, I think they're called hokey chairs. Those are the little mushroom looking chairs, which you'll see better in the next picture, kind of over here on the left. And we don't have those in all spaces, but I think the industry kind of has found that there are kids who adapt better when they're able to fidget, right? So I know I was a kid that I was moving around constantly, and your chair doesn't move around, especially the old ones that were fixed to the desk. And so the only thing left is for you to move, stand up, and that's obviously very disruptive. So when we've used these hokey chairs, we found that the kids who have maybe a little bit more difficult time sitting still, they can actually sit in their one place and kind of, just move their body around a little bit without being disruptive and without really it impacting their learning. So not all teachers love those chairs.
Are those on wheels or not?
That's not on wheels. It's just kind of cupped, like rounded on the bottom. So, they've got to use their balance to stay on there. But obviously their feet are still touching the ground. I mean, nobody's falling off of these things, but those are not on wheels. Those, if they need to be moved around, they get picked up and moved. They're very light, but We even have some of those at the high school. I don't know how often they're used again there, but in some of our rooms, the teachers wanted to give it a try, and so we've been doing that.
Those are helpful for the children that have like autism or something like that. It kind of, it just for some reason, it keeps them from squirreling all over the place, and it kind of focuses them, which to me, it seemed like it would do the opposite, but that's what it does for them.
It's almost counterintuitive. That's right.
Yeah.
So with this picture, this is effectively the same view as our first picture, but you can see that we have with those the 2 chairs and desks in the back, they've reoriented them and now they've set them up as individual desks. I mean, these happen to be right beside each other, but that's kind of the modular aspect of this. The shelving that's in the background here, as well as the cabinet on the far right, are all part of the furniture replacement that we've done. There's a bit more views of that. And then we've created in certain spaces, you know, kind of a little reading nook, a sitting area, again, for small group work. Now at the elementary level, you see it like this. As we walked through the Discovery Building, you may remember we saw a number of these areas kind of like in breakout spaces, not even rooms, but breakout spaces kind of in those commons areas. And as I understand it, it's being used quite well at the Discovery Building. And then of course the teachers use it in a way that suits them in their classrooms. And that's it. Go back to the other one. So that was our, that was the update, I guess, pictorial update on FF&E upgrades.
Okay.
So now we'll
Looks
move on
good.
to, thank you. So now we'll move on to our ES and SMS projects. And this, when we're talking about this, we are talking about those projects that came from the assessments, right? So we had those master plans done at each campus, and we had identified that we would be working at, I'm going to miss one, but it was Rogers, McKinley, Franklin Grant, and then JAMS Library. That was the group of projects that the FDAC had recommended to move forward and that the board had approved to move forward. And then Mirror Smash happened. And we, you know, our funding source for that it can only be Measure SMS. Now, as we've moved forward with that project, we've said, and I think this is again something we discussed last time, it wouldn't make sense right now. So we know we need to defer at least one project, but it wouldn't make sense to decide what project's going to be deferred when we don't know for sure that all those projects will get through DSA in time anyway. So for example, if our department had its way, we probably would have deferred McKinley. For one thing, it was the biggest of those projects, which means that it kind of left the most cushion funding wise, so that we could afford to make sure that we had enough money to afford to do the Mirror Smash project. Because again, that project, it naturally is going to, any renovation or modernization project will naturally have a lot of unknowns. That one is a project that's specifically caused by water intrusion and, you know, leaks and in some cases biological growth. So it's very natural that that one's going to have some unknowns and additional costs. But that being said, we couldn't just say, well, let's defer McKinley because that one has, you know, it gives us the most flexibility. Because if McKinley is ready to go and Rogers isn't, well, and we've deferred McKinley, and then all of a sudden we don't have enough projects to move forward. So we've moved forward with all of those projects through DSA. And I think it's good that we made that choice because at this point, it looks like McKinley will in fact be ready. Rogers will be ready. JAMS will be ready. Franklin and Grant, which the two combined were enough to cover, we believe that they're enough to cover the Mirror Smash. Those are a little bit smaller projects, but we believe they're enough to cover the Mirror Smash work. They're having some hiccups getting through DSA. And really, frankly, I believe it's at Franklin, we're having some issues with space. In other words, when we go through our projects and specifically during construction, it doesn't look like we're going to have enough classroom space, which it was originally supposed to work out, but now we're being told by site staff, no, that doesn't work. So we're working through that. We're not there yet, but we are working through the process of figuring out what's happening next there. But because those projects are looking to be hung up, it may be that those are the projects that get deferred so that we can do mirror smash. We'll know more as we get a little bit further. This is probably an early springtime decision that we need to make. I mean, this isn't a decision we really can make now, but early spring is when we anticipate being able to. The mirror smash project is moving forward as well. So we're going forward with design there. Now, we've talked in the past about how DSA sometimes requires additional work. and I believe we've talked about the 50% threshold. So if replacement of, I think I said that in reverse. If the renovation of a building is more than 50% of the replacement cost of that building, DSA says, they don't actually tell you to replace it, but they say, okay, you have to do a full seismic upgrade and bring it up to existing code in all respects. Now, you know, we're at a point where we're very close to 50% on that project. We don't agree with the numbers that DSA uses. So they use a per square foot cost of something like $480 a square foot. And we know that what we're actually seeing on the projects that we build is double that. So we don't think it's really an apples to apples comparison. I don't think we can say, well, we believe our cost to renovate is going to be X. And they say, okay, cool. The cost to replace it would be $480 times however many square feet you have. Well, I mean, geez, our cost to renovate might be $480 per square foot. I'm just using these random, not random, but these numbers as an example, but.
Well, that's a bummer.
It is. So there's a bust in the process because I think DSA is using inaccurate numbers, and they say, okay, well, fine, show us 3 other projects that are very similar to the one you're talking about. And if your cost is higher, then we'll accept a higher cost for purposes of comparison. But there aren't a whole lot of projects like this. You know, for us, the most recent project that would be anything like this would be Edison, which was 10 years ago. So it's not really a very good comparison either. So anyway, as we work through this, and again, the trigger isn't that it would require us to replace the building, but it might require, I want to say involuntary, but mandated seismic upgrades. Now, there's a point to be made that nobody really wants to argue against making seismic upgrades, right? I mean, you're saying, oh, I'm going to make the building safer. Nobody's going to say, no, I don't want you to do that. It's just that there's a cost that is not insignificant. So because we're at that threshold, and because we're going to be tearing off basically the entire exterior skin of the building, if we're ever going to make the upgrades, this is the time to do it. So we're working with the architects and their structural engineers now to kind of figure out what those upgrades would be. Now we think in some cases it may be, you know, if we have a shear wall here, maybe we need to remove the plywood and then put up new plywood with a different nail, call it a nailing pattern, but screwing pattern really. And you know, if it's not too significant, we kind of think we should just do it. So we're going to be meeting with the board to discuss that. But there, you know, and I say it's not too significant. It doesn't mean there's not a cost to it. Of course, there's a cost, but we will be meeting with the board to discuss that, because if we ever get to the point, even if we got through this project, well, let me step back and say this differently. If we got this project approved at, say, 40% of what they consider to be the replacement cost, and then we come up and we have some change orders because we find additional water intrusion or we find mold in a place we didn't expect it, they count that cost and they say, okay, now you're at 48. And if we find another one that kicks us over 50, we are immediately required to stop the project and do a seismic upgrade. If we finish this project and we stay below that 50 number, but the district says in a couple of years, you know what we need to do? We need to move the entrance of that campus to this building over here, which is a plan. I mean, that is something we'd like to do at some point. DSA reaches back and they say, okay, what projects were finished within the last 5 years? The cost of that project gets added to this project. You're over 50%. Now you do a seismic upgrade. And this is on a building that we've finished, right? I mean, it's buttoned up and ready to go. So we think there's a lot of merit to considering doing it now, even if we don't reach that 50% threshold, because we know we're going to be close to it. And again, it's a pretty, it would be a hard thing to argue against saying we want to make a safe.
I was gonna say, you can't say, oh, we chose not to make it up to code.
But now, in fairness, this is a building that is, it's built in the 90s, right? So the difference seismically, structurally between a building that's built in the 90s and a building that's built today isn't dramatic. It's not like it was built in the 1920s and it's unreinforced concrete brick or something like that. So we feel like, look, this is certainly a safe building, but there's merit to considering doing a voluntary seismic upgrade. So
I mean, Steve, it sounds like you're so close to the threshold that you're going to probably hit it or go over it regardless of what you do.
At some point, whether it's in this project or the next one, yeah, I think that's right.
So it makes sense to do it now rather than delay it and try to do it later.
And we think that's the right approach. So anyway, so that's where we are. We will be meeting with the board facility subcommittee to talk about that, and then ultimately the board to talk about it. But that project cost may go up. So we were anticipating something like, I want to say $9 million plus a pretty healthy contingency of, I think, 3 million. And now we think that, it might go. And so instead of, what would that have been, 12? So instead of 12 million, it might be that the construction cost goes up to 16 million or something. But again, it's too early to know that. I'm throwing this out there as just some ballparks that we've heard from our structural engineer, but they haven't designed it. So we can't say those are the costs. But yeah, I think you said it right, Michael. It's, if this is the time to do it, and it kind of just makes sense.
Absolutely.
What's the timeline on the project, or is there one?
So our goal originally was to have this project open in August of 2024. Now we've run into some hiccups here, including DSA taking a little bit harder line than we anticipated. We recognize that they're not going to view this as an emergency. For us, it may be an emergency. It's certainly a high priority, but for DSA, an emergency is building burned down, and we absolutely have to do something to get kids back in. We were able to relocate 350 kids, however many it was, to other campuses. So DSA is not going to look at this and say, well, you definitely have an emergency and have to get those kids back in there because we have them somewhere else. Now that's a positive. That's a very good thing that the district was able to do that, but it means DSA is not going to bend over backwards to help us out. And they're certainly not going to bend any rules like, you don't have to do it if you're at 50% of the cost. So at this point, I anticipate we're probably not looking at August of 24. I would say August of 25 is certainly achievable, but we have to really get through this next phase of figuring out exactly what the project's going to be. And then obviously design it, and in that process, figure out how long construction will take.
Okay, thank you.
So then I think our last item was safety and security upgrades. Now this is where,
hang on, you said you have on there first projects?
Oh, I said these out of order. First projects was really talking about which projects are happening first. So that would be the McKinley grant.
Got it.
Sorry, I did those backwards.
That's okay, just clarification, thank you.
Yep. So the last item we have is our safety and security upgrades. We've talked about some of these. What I'm gonna do is give you an idea of what's complete, what is under construction right now, and then what's coming. So at John Adams, we've done our safety and security, all of our low voltage upgrades. It's complete. Now that was video surveillance, as well as PA clocks and bells and intrusion alarm. Franklin is complete with PA clocks and bells. Grant, McKinley, Webster, and Malibu Malibu Elementary all got their PA clocks and bells completed. We're currently working on Lincoln Middle School as well as Roosevelt. And I think those are probably about a month or two away from being done. And the next things we have anticipated or planned rather, are the Will Rogers Elementary or Will Rogers Learning Center, the Obama campus, Edison, although at Edison, it's going to be a pretty minor project, I think, but we do still have some work to do there with the PA clocks and bells. Our Malibu High campus, now it's a little different because that one's under construction with the new project that's coming, and then we're gonna have a lot of changes on that campus. So that may be more like kind of the maintenance type of stuff. And we've got an intrusion alarm project that will be coming at Rogers a little further down the line, like maybe next summer. And then we had Smash Mirror anticipated to begin, well, to happen, I think this school year, but obviously it just doesn't make sense to do that right now, because whatever we do, we know that there's going to be a significant amount of work on that campus. And, we could get an intrusion alarm system in there, which would be helpful, but it would also get torn apart in, 8 months or something. So we're not really pushing. In fact, I would say it differently. We're deferring the mirror smash work for both the intrusion alarm as well as the PA bells and clocks to just be done as part of the renovation project. But beyond that, everything else is moving forward, either, like I said, either completed, underway, or coming soon.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Steve?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Thank you.
Steve, I think your suggestion of having the June meeting on site makes a whole lot of sense.
Okay.
So we'll plan on doing that. The March 14th meeting, we'll see what Kerry wants to do when he gets back from his vacation. Not really. When he gets back from Portugal, but we'll go from there.
Okay.
That being said, if nobody has any additional comments, I need a motion to adjourn.
So the next meeting is when?
March 14th.
Yeah, we
March
tentatively put it
14th.
as March 14th, and we'll confirm that as we get closer.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy, did I hear you make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Michael. Yes, adjourn.
I need a second. Jeffrey, did I hear you make a second?
You did. You did. I
you,
second
Jeffrey.
the motion.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Hi, Bernice.
That's everybody. Thank you all for making the meeting tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Michael.
Thanks,
All
Steve
right.
and Melody.
Thank you,
both.
Steve.
Thank you,
Thanks,
staff. That was great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Good
Thank
one.
you.
All right.
Everybody,
Bye.
Bye.
bye-bye.